What's up, martial arts fanatics? Welcome back. As always, I am Coach Greg, and today we're doing the full system breakdown on Merab Dvalishvili. Before I get started, don't forget, go check out my Nemean fight system. It is available on Dynamic Striking BJJ Fanatics, as well as on Amazon. Please go check it out. Now, that being said, let's get right into it. Merab Dvalishvili is a guy who, when he was on a 6-fight win streak, he had caught my attention. Beating guys like Dodson, like really, really legitimate fighters, Mariah's. But these last 4 fights, when you lead up to this on a 6-fight win streak, you always kind of wonder, how's he going to do against top 5 quality guys? And he has been answering that question and then some. He's cleaning house on former champions at this point. Jose Aldo, at no point has he ever put up less than a champion level fight, right? Henry Cejudo, he made Henry Cejudo look like he was an out. I mean, he ran through Henry Cejudo. Cejudo had a really good first round, and then after that, it was just a very one-sided fight. Peter Yan, really kind of answered the question, can Dvalishvili do this for 5 rounds against somebody of the highest caliber? And against Peter Yan, he made that very obvious that yes, he absolutely can. This guy is a force of nature, a Georgian fighter who works with Matt Serra, Longo, Aljamain Sterling, really great camp that's really preparing him for these fights. And of course, in a division with Aljo, who has fought all these guys, he really knows what to expect against every one of these guys. And it's put him in a really great position. So with, of course, his upcoming fight against Sugar Sean, it's going to make for a really interesting matchup because his nickname, The Machine, is very well deserved. He is a cardio machine, and we're going to talk about all this today and what he does that allows him to be so successful. So that being said, stay tuned. Let's start breaking down Merab Dvalishvili. Okay, guys, so let's start by talking about the elephant in the room, and that's the pace. Obviously, this is not something that everybody can achieve on a regular basis, right? I am 43. I just can't match that kind of pace, right? But even at the highest level, these guys aren't matching that pace. He just has a third long, right? This guy just can do something that other people can't do. But it's not just the fact that he has this incredible endurance. It's how he weaponizes it. And that's what I want to talk about today, because there is definitely a time and a place where we can use this ourselves. Even if we don't do it indefinitely, we can do it at least burst enough to have an effect that can really kind of change an entire fight. Now, when you talk about a self-defense situation, what Merab does feels a lot more like an actual fight. He puts a very heavy pace on his opponents so that it exhausts them, right? It is a very constant pace. There's none of this feeling each other out, like finding your moments and setting up. It's just go, go, go. And so from that perspective, it is a little bit overwhelming for his opponents who are used to being able to set a pace. I just got done watching Henry Cejudo watch back his fight, and he was talking about, I think he said this like 5-10 times, like, man, I don't know why at the end of the first round, I was just so tired. Why was I so tired? Well, I think that the reason is this. With Merab Dvalishvili, it's not just about a constant pace, right? Henry Cejudo is a very high-end wrestler. He's an Olympic wrestler. He can do a pace, right? There's no question that in his camp, he was working to be able to achieve this, but it's more than just a pace. It is a pace combined with pressure where it's like this. If I am attacking, there are moments when I know when I can catch my breath, okay? Even if I do it under a very high pace, but he doesn't know that. And so he has to be at a 10 the whole time. So I can go 10, 10, 10, 8, 8, 8, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 7, 9, 10, right? I can kind of balance it and kind of catch my breath in periodic spots. Even if it's at a high pace, it can go a little bit less for a brief moment. I'll give you an example. So like when Dvalishvili puts guys up against the cage, right? He gets his underhook and he's working. He can kind of catch his breath for a second. And in fact, a lot of times he does. Catches his breath, he's working, but he's not really working at like a 10, right? He's working at a 7. But the other guy's got to be at a 10, right? And this is my point. He never lets them not be at a 10. Whereas he has occasional moments where he can come down a little bit, catch his breath, and then reset. Does that mean that he's not still working like a maniac? Of course he is. But not the same way that they are. So what they're feeling is worse than what he's feeling. And that is a big difference when you're fighting at the highest level. And that is why I think Henry Cejudo at the end of round 1 was so tired. And he was like, I don't understand, like, against a guy like this. Now, there is also something to be said for some guys, that pressure. There's just some guys that I don't know what it is about rolling with them. They're just more tiring, right? They just have more pressure, and what they do just has more impact, right? It just is what it is. But with Merab, what it is it's a constant changeup that makes them feel like a step behind. And that feeling like you were behind all the time playing catch up is exhausting. On top of that, he is using pace and he is weaponizing using it. And the nice thing about it is if you can tire somebody out, you can take away their power. You know, if you look at, like, there's been times where he has gotten clipped. You know, I think it was Marias who caught him with that left hook early on in their first fight. Clipped him, like, really rattled him. But then he came back and that was all he had. That was his only chance to finish the fight. And this is what Merab is able to do. And we've talked about this with guys like Khamzat Chimaev, Dricus du Plessis. If you can put a very heavy pace on, at least for one round, you can take away power from your opponent. So maybe you can't do this for 5 rounds like Merab can. But what you can do is, if you get a guy who's a very powerful striker and you're worried about that eating that shot and getting knocked out, you put one really hard round out there and you tire this dude out. And then the next round, he just doesn't, the rest of the fight, he's just not gonna have as much on his punches. Now you're probably gonna be tired too, so you're not gonna have as much either. But now you can play a tactics game rather than risking him throwing one shot and just knocking you out. But you still gotta get through that first round, and that's the problem with a guy like Merab. Unfortunately, he has enough change-ups that it's not a huge concern, but because he's so reckless, there is a concern in that first round. But once he gets through the first round, you've taken away their power. But the thing is, when you put that kind of a pace and pressure on somebody, you're attacking, you're shooting. You're attacking, changing up your levels, and then shooting, constantly re-shooting. They get up, you shoot again, you come back in, you're putting shots on them, and then you're giving them pressure with different level changes. And then you're giving them pressure, giving them look, they start to respond to that, and you shoot. They start to respond to the shot, you come back up, and you throw heavy hands on them. And so they're always a step behind on every interaction. And this is what Merab really does that's genius. His integration of shooting and striking is unparalleled. It is easily the best I've ever seen. His ability to blend his striking and his shooting seamlessly. They are one and the same. And we're gonna talk about what he does specifically that makes that possible. But this is what he does to overwhelm people. And this is what takes away their defense. Because if they're so busy trying to deal with the takedown defense, they leave themselves open to the striking. As soon as they start to respond back to the striking, they get taken down. And it's over and over and over again. Then they get tired and they're sloppy and they start making mistakes and it just goes downhill. And this is what Merab does to people. So stay tuned. The next section, we'll come back and we'll talk about specifics of what he does in his striking. All right, guys, let's talk about some specifics of what he does. Of course, I'm joined with my partners, Bob and Hobart, who, while he's blue, he's actually not depressed. He's just harnessed. He's not thinking about anything, okay? I put him up this way because I want to try to showcase some of the wrestling, and I'm hoping that this will maybe make it a little bit easier to do so, to be able to show it with some hanging legs. Okay, so we'll see how it goes. So let's talk about some of the striking stuff first. This really is what kind of sets the stage for that seamless transition that we were talking about. Now, he mostly tends to hang out in an orthodox stance. That is his preference. He does a lot of bouncing entry, so that even if he doesn't engage, it still threatens. But most of the time, as soon as he bounces in, he puts hands on him. What I like about his striking is usually when you get a guy like this who's looking for constant takedowns, they tend to get a little bit too dependent on just throwing jab crosses all the time. And what I like about Merab is that he threatens a lot of other stuff as well. You will see him coming out here, threatening the spinning hook kick, right? Coming in here, threatening a leg kick, and then throwing some punches behind it. Throwing the jab cross, throwing the body kick, right? He mixes up his attacks very well so that he adds a lot of nice level changes. And that makes it a lot harder for his opponents. You know, when you get a guy who's a solid wrestler, that they throw a jab cross and then they shoot. They throw a jab cross and they shoot. It makes it easier to defend that because I can come in here and just defend the same thing over and over again. But when you talk about a guy who adds level changes into his attacks as well, and you're talking about, a leg kick to a strike, right? Come up to the jab cross, jab, come to leg kick, right? When you add in that stuff, and he's throwing spinning hook kicks, and he's throwing leg kicks and body kicks and stuff like that, that is now a very different thing to contend with. And that is a challenge. On top of that, what I like that he does, and this is part of what makes everything so seamlessly. Now his jab, he does it, he drops a little bit, but his cross, he drops a lot on his cross, and maybe he shoots, and maybe he doesn't. And this is what messes people up. And really what he does is this. He comes in, he attacks, right? He throws an attack. And then what he's gonna do is keep attacking until they start to defend or they try to come at him. Once either one of those things happens and they're thinking about striking, he shoots, right? And a lot of times what you'll see is he likes to prefer the proactive shot, meaning that he punctuates an attack with a shot. So he'll do something like jab cross and then come in here for a single leg. And a lot of what he tends to do is come up and start looking for trips. He really likes to pick the leg up and start kicking out that foot. Or if he pulls it across his body, he'll start doing this kind of stuff a lot. If he doesn't get it, a lot of times he starts circling to the back here. What's great about it is then, and this is something Colby Covington's really good at, or at least he used to be, off of a failed shot, he immediately transitions back into striking. If he ends up in a clinch, anytime he disengages, he puts hands on it. Anytime. So it becomes a seamless transition. So then once he shoots, now they're thinking about the shot, and he lands a heavy hand. And this is what I'm talking about. Then he starts coming in here, and he starts throwing some attacks again, and once again, then he gets used to it, and then he comes in here, and he does that ankle pick to a high cross. If he gets it, great, right? If he doesn't get it, no problem. He comes up striking again. It leaves them constantly in a bad position. So it goes from striking, dropping his head, threatening the feint, this bouncing tactic, and then he starts to bounce the jab and shoot him low, right? And like I said, a lot of times he likes to get the single leg, and then what he'll do a lot of times is start to pick it up and think about tripping here. This is what his modus operandi is. But what's nice is he does a lot of chain wrestling too. So as he picks it up, if they start to defend, he goes, okay, and he runs the pipe. Ping-ponging between different attacks, okay? And this is why they're always a step behind. He attacks striking with a threat that's low. He attacks the level change striking, right? He attacks with something big to throw him off, right? He attacks, once again, big. He attacks level change. Now they start to come at him and he shoots. Or he starts to come at them and they're starting to defend his striking and he shoots. If he gets it, he comes up with it and he trips. If he doesn't get it, he chases after him, he puts hands on him, and then he comes after him again with another shot. It's a constant. And this is why his opponents are so exhausted, because he's constantly on them. It's never a chance to respond to any one thing. If you respond to striking, you get taken down. If you respond to takedowns, you get punched in the face. And it's just constant. Now, once he gets a guy down, let's come back and talk about that in a minute. First, let's talk about clinches. If he goes for a single leg, it's very common for him to come up to a body clinch as his disengagement. And then from here, what happens a lot of times is he forces them to work to disengage, which also tires them out. But from here, if he gets to a clinch, a lot of times what you'll see almost every time, he throws a knee strike, maybe 2 knee strikes, and then as soon as they disengage, it's a right elbow. Every time. He does it against the cage, he does it in the middle of the ring. And it's always whenever they're facing him. He throws 1 or 2 knees, forces them to work, and as they disengage, catches them with the right elbow. Every time. Sometimes he'll make it a right hook, depending on space, but usually it's the right elbow. What it means is that his clinch game is based on the idea of making them work to get to the clinch, making them work to get out of the clinch, and eating damage on the way out, right? He doesn't do a lot of takedowns from the clinch when they're facing him. Now, when they turn away, he'll happily take it back, right? He shoots, and he starts to come up, and they start to turn away, and he'll grab this back hip here, like so. And he starts to come up behind him. And then you're thinking about mat returns and stuff like that. A lot of times what happens is they'll start to put themselves up against the cage, and he starts pulling out this foot to bring him down. That type of stuff seems to be what his preference is. Once he gets him down, it's bring him down, work for a second, let them work themselves back up. Let them carry your weight. Let them continue to tire themselves. And the thing that's great about it is he might only get half his takedowns in the round, maybe even less. But what are the judges seeing? They're seeing him constantly attacking. They're seeing him getting the takedowns. They're seeing him landing shots, him getting in top position, him putting people against the cage. It's him always aggressive. Him always being the aggressor, winning situations. The best that his opponents can hope for is as he shoots, he goes for like an ankle pick or something like that, and they manage to get away and not get hit. I'll take that trade-off any day. He's not really in danger here. And if they do try to sprawl him, like I said, a lot of times he just comes up to here and goes to the body clinch, makes them work to escape, and eats that elbow again. That generally tends to be the way that he breaks guys down. Okay. I will talk about it here because it's not going to take that long. When he gets guys down, this is the one part of his game I think could stand to use a little improvement. I don't want to take down the Bob because I already just hung it up and it's going to be a lot of work to take him down. But what tends to happen is that when he gets on top of guys, you know, he'll get to like a top half or something like that, or get inside a closed guard, and he throws some little piddly punches, and then he lets them work back up. Now, I get from his standpoint, he wants to keep reshooting on guys because it tires them out. I wonder if maybe he kind of lets them up so that he can do that. But I kind of wonder what would happen if he had more of a ground presence, right? You know, if you could take what he does and add in the kind of top game that a guy like, in a top wrestling style game that you talk about with guys like Khabib Nurmagomedov, Islam Makhachev, like that style of top wrestling, getting a handcuff, the far side wrist control here, right? Getting into this kind of stuff and start breaking guys down. Like if they start to turn away, getting head posture, locking up this leg and stuff like that. That type of stuff, I think would elevate his game. And he might just feel like he doesn't need it. But the thing that I say that might be the only downside of his game is he does let guys off the hook on the ground. That is a position I think I would like to see him forcing more of an advancement for position. And I don't see that a ton with him. He gets to a top position, he throws some punches, and he kind of lets them work them way back up, right? What I would like to see is more of a systematic approach where, like, if you end up in a closed guard, starting to stack them and throw bigger bombs and using that to pass over a foot, maybe a leg drag across, advancing to a position, throwing shots, using that to get to maybe a head and arm choke or force a back exposure to get a rear naked choke. That kind of pass, strike, submit mentality, I think he would have a lot more early finishes. I think he'd be able to finish a lot more fights by round 2. And getting into a championship level, that might be a thing that he needs, but maybe it doesn't because he is kind of running through everybody right now. So I guess that's my only criticism, but I don't know if it's even really a criticism because he does have a game plan and his game plan is to exhaust them. What I will say I do see him do a lot is when he gets on the ground, he will stand up and he'll pick up a leg, forcing their hip off the ground, so that as they're pulling up the leg, that they have to try to work their way back up while he's holding the leg. And he'll use that to get a couple more punches on their way up. It does make it more difficult for them to get up, but I think guys at that level, it's not slowing them down that much. So his ground game is probably one area. And I think the other area I would like to see a little bit more is when he does back guys to the cage. When he backs into the cage and he has a back exposure, like I said, you'll start seeing him trip out legs and stuff like that, doing mat returns, walking the back, stuff like that. But as soon as they turn to face him, he stops working for takedowns. And I think that if he established more like a far side wrist control game, like which is what I really like to do, or he started working to get his knee behind him and stuff like that to start getting that back exposure here, I think that would really help him, right? Because he tends to get in here and he works for like some over-under. But at this point, it's very rare for him to finish a takedown. So usually he does, he throws some strikes in here, right? A lot of times when they're behind, he spends most of his time kneeing the back of their thigh, which I'm gonna be honest, I don't think that really does that much. It looks good to the judges, but it's not really that effective. I'd like to see a more established striking game and a more established takedown game when he's against the cage and they're facing him in particular, so that he can start really kind of breaking these guys down from here, and maybe even then dropping it down to his singles and stuff like that. And I wonder if he doesn't do it because it's a lot of energy to work from that position, and it's less energy for them than it is for him, and his goal is always to make them expend more energy. But it is a place I would like to see him develop more. So overall, I hope you enjoy this, guys. Make sure you share with your friends. Thanks for watching.